I'll wait just another minute or two. But yeah, I won't focus solely on Utah, but we had our own lawsuit filed here in Utah recently. And, it kind of opened my eyes to, what we really need to do to defend our profession in a certain way. I guess I took offense to saying that basically we're door openers. I took a little bit of offense to that. And so I got kind of fired up about it, talked to Shauna, and we decided to do a little bit of a webinar series. I've specialized in the beginning, not everybody was on here, but I specialized in buyer agency and being solely a buyer agent. I would close about 50 to 60 transactions a year on average, just with buyers alone, personally. And then I oversaw brokerage as well, which I currently do now. And I have always practiced where I had a buyer broker agreement with my client. They knew how much they owed me, and I would negotiate my commissions, right? So I see a lot of people getting really worked up about the prospect of negotiating their commissions. There is certain groups of us that have always done it that way. And so today I just thought it would be helpful to dive into buyer agency, how we got where we are today, and kind of what I see moving forward and ways to navigate and get your unique value proposition. So does that sound like a plan for everybody? Good?
Sounds great. Yes.
What we'll do is, you can put questions in the chat. I'm going to save those for the end, right? And we'll go over questions at the end. So I'll talk, hopefully I don't bore you for a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about history of buyer agency, all those things, and then we'll take questions at the end. So any questions or comments before we get going? No, nothing? Nothing?
Tom, did you raise your hand?
I think he was raising his hand for being in Utah. So, right, Tom? Tom's on mute, so I can't hear him, but.
No, I wasn't raising my hand.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we're just going to dive into it. So today we're talking about a topic that I feel like it stands at kind of the crossroads of real estate, the law, and market innovation, kind of all mixed together. We're going over buyer agency, the lawsuits, history, and kind of a buyer agent's unique advantage. I've always loved being a buyer agent. It's been kind of an important cornerstone of my business. So this discussion is not just about dissecting like these issues with commission lawsuits, but about understanding the history that got us here and the transformative potential that they could potentially have on our industry. One area of extreme importance when it comes to being a buyer agent that not a lot of agents completely understand, I have found in just having my brokerage and working with a lot of agents and kind of training and teaching them, is the fiduciary duty and agency and how that actually really works. And even if we know, we don't always know how to effectively communicate that to our client and effectively communicate our unique value. So did someone say something? I'm sorry. Did I miss something? Anyway, so, not a lot of agents completely understand that fiduciary duty and how to properly represent someone's best interests and put them above their own while putting together an actual business, right? Are we salesmen? Are we consultants? What are we, right? And what is our unique value while you're gathering your tribe of clients? So let's get started. I'm first going to tell you a little bit. I got into real estate in 2008. And I spent about the first year kind of wondering, who I was as an agent and what I really needed to be doing. I asked that question of myself many times, and it's really exciting when I got my first transaction. And it was about my third transaction. I had clients. So mind you, I got in 2008. The market had shifted. Everybody remembers back 2007, 2008. Has anybody here been an agent since before then? Anybody on here? Tom? Yeah. Mary? Is that Mary? Yeah. So you would kind of remember that shift, I would bet, right? And kind of all the sky was falling with real estate and things like that. Well, that was right when I got into real estate. And I got in when it seemed like everybody else was bailing ship and getting out. And what I found is I didn't really know, I guess nobody told me that I was actually building a business, right? Like it's not just a job, it's you're opening a business. And so when I got into it, it took me about a good year. I felt like I didn't know anything. I didn't really have a good mentor at that time. It was just kind of like get in and sink or swim, right? And then I had these clients that were really good friends of mine. I went to church with them, and we lived in it was on the Mississippi River in Illinois, in between where Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri meet. And they had asked me, they'd had their home on the market for about 2 years. The listing agreement had come up, and they were switching agents and asked me if I would help them. And of course, I was really excited. This is one of the most highest end homes in that area, for that area. So I listed the home, and when I put it on the market, I did all the comps, I did everything. I was really excited, really nervous. And I got an offer within the first month. So this home had been on the market like 2.5 years. And I got an offer the very first month, and they were really excited. I was excited, but I was representing the buyer as well. So I was, back in the day, I don't know, they called it like double dipping, but it's really like limited agency, or in some states they call it dual agency, right? And so I was just kind of rendered kind of useless in the middle of that, is how I felt. So again, that affected how I felt. I'm a person that I have to believe deeply in what I'm doing, or else I have a hard time doing it and, effectively communicating that to people. So to get them to want to use me. So everything was fine. I was very excited. I was going to, double side the transaction. And then the appraisal came back, and the appraisal came back way lower than what it really should have, what the comps were showing. I mean, I'd gone over those comps. I'd gone over them with my broker. Those comps were spot on, but the appraiser had found different ones. Well, I couldn't help anybody at that point, right? I couldn't help the buyer, and I couldn't help the seller. And I felt really awful for my friends. I felt like, I lost sleep over it. And I thought, is this really what being an agent is all about? Like, is this how my career is going to be? Is this what's going to become of me? And it was at that point in time that I started taking every class I could on agency. And I went and got my GRI. I went and got my ABR. I went and I got several other designations. And I couldn't get enough of education about that. Because in order for me to do something that I really believed about, I had to really believe in it. And I don't know if you guys are the same way. I know as agents, we all care. You're on this call probably because you care, right? Those are the people that show up for these kinds of things. So, I really struggled after that, because I'm like, what am I doing? How do I run a business based on, I don't know what, like, what do I run it on? So, in order to understand, and this is when I dove into it, you have to understand kind of the history of real estate, realtors, how we all came about. So we're going to dig a little deeper into the history of agency. Believe it or not, the first records for home sales by a salesperson in the United States began around 1890. Their attempts to form a real estate association failed at that time, but it began a process so that on May 12th of 1908, the National Association of Realtors was founded, and as at that time we were called the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges in Chicago. Then in 1916, the National Association of Real Estate Exchanges changed its name to the National Association of Real Estate Boards. And even then, until 1919, pretty much anybody could call themselves a real estate broker without any professional certification or licensing. Needless to say, the practice of selling homes in this era was kind of considered shady at best, and brokers were known as curbstoners. So, that was a type of slang used because most brokers were believed to be dishonest. And, that's really sad to me, actually, that, that's who they thought we were. And they would place multiple signs in front of homes trying to compete with one another. And as a homeowner or buyer, you had to simply pick one of the signs and who you wanted to go with, right? So kind of craziness back then. Then traditional real estate sales practices started to emerge out of this era, and true real estate agents asked permission to gain listings to sell and earn a home seller's trust. Now, notice that I say home seller. Single agents gained permission from a seller, but there was really no one for the buyer. Now, these practices started most heavily in Chicago, St. Louis, Baltimore, those areas. And this allowed these agents to become the go-between for home sellers and the buyer. But again, their responsibility or their contract was with the seller. In 1930s and 40s, you would have an open house as an agent to create sales networks of multiple homes to present to buyers, right? So you're never really trying to represent the buyer back then. If one was not desired, then agent could then show them another one that they had, right? And so ideally it was great to have several in your network to improve the chances of a sale. In the 1940s and 50s, the post-World War II kind of saw a huge boom in real estate sales. All the soldiers were coming back home, looking for a new place, raise a family, that type of thing. So homes kind of came on and off the market really, really quickly during this time, which we've kind of seen that ourselves, right? But that was the first time the term realtor was used. And mostly it was women at that time and became, realtors in record numbers. So with the foundation of real estate being all about getting a seller to allow them to market their home, very little thought was ever given to home buyers, with every agent being a sub-agent of the seller up until about 1989, 1990, when a group of realtors who thought that a buyer deserved representation as well started buyer agency with the National Association of Realtors, finally recognizing it in 1993. Crazy times, right? It makes sense when you think about how many realtors were viewed back then as kind of salesmen. Instead of the consultants, which I think we have evolved, or I would assert is really what we are or should be. The shift in mindset has taken many years and is still shifting, as you see many agents still kind of going at it, trying to sell a home, when really the only thing we should be selling our clients on is our expertise and knowledge to save them time, money, heartache, and make the home selling process seamless, while also helping them, achieve the American dream of home ownership. As we go into it, and as I kind of told you the story about how I got to where I really started taking my fiduciary duty seriously. At that time, for my own personal reasons, I had decided at that time that I would only ever represent one side of a contract. And I started focusing even more heavily on the buyers. Like I really had an affinity with the buy side. And I worked with a partner at that time where he took all the listings and helped out that side, and I helped out the buyers. And I, to this day, absolutely love helping buyers. The more I learned about agency, the more it just kind of confirmed that this was the path I wanted to take. And so back when we were all a sub agent of the seller, has anybody been in that long? Like I haven't been in there that long, but has anybody here been in that long where you remember everybody was a sub agent? Tom, that's you. See, Tom's going to raise his hand for everything. You've been here forever. How many years have you been in, Tom? I'm just curious.
1987 is when I
Wow, so
started.
you got in right before buyer agency was becoming a thing,
Yeah, we did. Everybody worked for the seller, or so he said.
right?
Buyer agency was imperative that something was changed because
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think that's, I mean, you saw movies like the Money Pit and things like that come out where it just made it seem like, you know, an agent would sell you anything, right? And buyers were getting the raw end of the deal every time, kind of is what the narrative was, whether that was true or not. So for decades, the real estate industry, you know, has operated under a traditional model where listing and buyer agents split commissions or offered a certain amount out, not a, you know, split them in some aspect, which is a practice that has been reinforced by the National Association of Realtors, you know, with the cooperative compensation rule that they had. This rule mandated listing brokers to offer compensation to buyer brokers, you know, the cooperative commission. And they facilitated it to provide a smooth transaction within the realtor affiliated multiple listing service. However, you know, with recent events kind of signal a significant shift could be coming. Last week, the U.S. Department of Justice, kind of in a landmark move, came out and proposed a complete ban on home sellers making commission offers to buyer brokers. So basically what this would mean is that sellers aren't allowed to offer compensation at all. This proposal would aim to decouple commissions is what they're saying, thereby fostering competition and innovation amongst buyer brokers by empowering buyers to negotiate directly with their own agent. So the Consumer Federation of America, they actually came out as well and hailed this proposal as a kind of, they're calling it a major watershed in promoting competition in real estate. That's what they say this is all about, is potentially dismantling decades-old practices of what they are calling at this time, not me, but what they're calling is fixed commissions through industry collaboration, right? The DOJ's filing suggests that, you know, this change would not burden buyers, right, with out-of-pocket commission payments. Instead, it says it opens up the door for buyers to request sellers pay the buyer's broker from the home sale proceeds. So you would still negotiate with your buyer and then ask the seller to pay that as part of their closing costs is kind of what they're proposing. You know, kind of still maintaining the current practice, but with a critical difference. The inclusion of negotiation directly between buyers and their brokers. You know, I'm wondering what NASR's response to these developments has been. It's been kind of mixed. You know, they've expressed concerns that prohibiting all offers of compensation could harm consumers by making it more costly for home buyers to access capable representation and potentially reducing access to fair housing. You know, they argue that there's much more at stake for both buyers and sellers across the country. Really, despite these concerns, it's pretty clear that no matter what, the landscape is going to change. The DOJ stance combined with, the Consumer Federation of America's stance and support is underscoring a growing consensus that they're not going to quit until the traditional commission model has changed or is what they deem more consumer friendly.
Hey, Susan.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Tom, did you have a question or a comment on that topic?
Yeah, I just had a thought. I've constantly wondered why we're not arguing this more along the lines of the seller is not paying a buyer's commission.
Right.
The seller doesn't pay the commission. The seller pays the commission to me as the listing agent.
Mm-hmm.
And I decide to offer a buyer's agent's commission from my commission.
Right.
I think that I don't even know why, and I'm not talking to you because it's the whole industry right now referring to sellers paying buyers commissions.
Mm-hmm. I get exactly what you're saying, Tom.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's all been in the message and in my viewpoint, not properly explaining or training agents from the beginning. It wasn't, I think, when you take the national test or you take a agent or broker test and things like that, a lot of these things, like, it's explained, but it's not really trained on exactly how you would do that, right?
I couldn't agree more.
And so, like, I could get into a whole nother discussion about what I think should happen with licensing and things like that. But that being said, when I became a buyer agent solely during those years that I was for about 5 years. I work both sides now, but I helped a heck of a lot of buyers, and I never let the listing agent determine how much money I was going to make. I sat down with my buyer up front. I told them everything I was going to do to represent them. I went over my 122 plus things that I had that I was going to look out for on their behalf as a consultant and help them avoid the pitfalls. And they aren't paying me for, they're not paying me for that one transaction. They're paying me for all the experience that I bring to the table and help making their process seamless, helping them find the right home, the right price with the right terms and conditions, negotiating on their behalf. And so I don't want a listing agent determining how much I make. So for me, that was always, hey, they're hiring me. I always called it, if you're going to go to a listing agreement. Now, mind you, I still have my own opinion about, I think it's kind of going to be really hard on a buyer, and I'll get into that in a second. But at the same time, because they just don't have anything in place for a buyer to effectively really have control over how they're going to pay their agent. Because, yeah, they can hire an agent, but they better have the cash in addition to money down and all that in order to do it, or be able to negotiate with the seller to pay their closing costs. And in a multiple offer situation, that makes it hard. And so what? The buyer agent doesn't get paid for doing their job and helping them. I see a lot of problems with it. That being said, I never let the listing agent determine how much money I was going to make. My commission was between me and my client. And if the listing agent was not offering enough compensation to cover my fee, my buyer knew up front that they would be paying the difference, and I would try to negotiate that into the deal. But not, only one time was I ever able not to, and the buyer paid for it. So, and they were happy with that. But my point is that if you're offering enough value to your clients and you have developed a unique value proposition and know how to properly and confidently navigate it yourself, whatever they decide is not going to affect you. And so my thought is we all need to shore up bulletproof our businesses and build a business that is going to last you through any market and through any of the changes that could be coming our way, whether they are or not. I mean, yes, we all have our own opinions on what they should be doing. And quite frankly, I wish I could go argue the point myself. I think I would be really effective at it, as I'm sure we all do, right? But you know, is that going to happen? Most likely not. The best thing I can do is show other people how I have built a business that didn't rely upon any whatever they'd come up with cooperating commission and things like that. Does that make sense?
To me,
Yeah, to you.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. It's frustrating. I get, yeah, it's frustrating.
There are a can of worms that can go any direction at this point.
Yes, yes. And the only thing you can do, and that's one thing my mom always taught me, the only thing you can do is have control over your own self and your own business, right? So kind of getting back to, you know, Stephen Brobeck, he is with the consumer, you know, the CFA. He suggests that this shift could lead to greater variation in agent compensation. He thinks it will benefit consumers with an estimated 20 to 30 billion annually is what he thinks they will save, because he obviously doesn't believe that buyer agents add any value to the transaction, is my own thought, right? It's kind of what I took from that. But I would submit that they are dead wrong. I know it's not just me, let's face it. Not educating our consumers about the value we add to a transaction as buyer agents is what has gotten us here. How many of us have just said at one time or another, don't worry, I've got it, I'll handle this, you know, and you get through it, but you never really told the buyer everything you went through to get them what they wanted, right? All the work you put in behind it. And that's not just things that a transaction coordinator or a showing license showing help can do, that type of thing. We're talking about the things and the experience and the knowledge that a buyer agent has. When you look back, and Tom, you could probably remember this, when you look back, there were no, I mean, I bought a home in the early 90s. I used the listing agent. Nobody ever told me when I got the home, I found out that there were tree roots in the septic line, and I had water backup the first night I was in the home all over my finished basement. I found out I had termites. They flew through the wall at me. I had to replace a roof that had 7 layers on it, believe it or not, right? Like all those things, you know, would have been caught by a home inspection today. But guess what? There weren't really a lot of home inspectors back then, really, if any. That wasn't a thing. All the disclosures that have come about, all the progress we have made has been huge. And so I would submit that we need to actually put out there what we do. And that's why I started back in 2010 with my pledge that I gave to my clients. I also had a buyer presentation at the time. I called it Listing the Buyer. If I'm going to go to a listing presentation and sign a listing agreement with a seller, why am I not doing the same thing with a buyer if I'm going to work on their behalf? Unless you just enjoy going out and working for free and hoping you get paid at the end. Like, to me, that was a horrible business practice. Like, if I was going to go out and I was going to work and put my butt on the line for people, well, then I needed to know that in the end, if they bought a home, that they would buy it through me. It didn't really matter what home. I just wanted it to be the right home that was going to set them up both financially and with stability. Because let's face it, we help stabilize a community. Home ownership stabilizes a community. So we need to educate our clients about the value we add to a transaction as a buyer agent. And if you kind of look at what has gotten us here, when they switched from sub-agency where everybody was a sub-agent of the seller, to the potential of having buyer agency, which, by the way, here in Utah, everybody is still a sub-agent from the seller unless you have a signed buyer broker. And I'm amazed at the amount of people I come across that don't know that are agents themselves. They're like, well, I represent this client. Well, when I come across agents who don't even know that they don't really represent them and their fiduciary responsibility is to the seller unless they have a signed buyer broker, you know, you obviously haven't had that discussion with your client either. You know, look at all the amazing things we have brought about due to buyer representation. Look at where we're at. Shame on us for not educating our buyers and the world basically about what we do, to the point where they think that all they need to do is get a door open and have someone draft up paperwork. You know, we need to start educating everybody about what we do and how much we care and what we go through to take care of our clients and ensure them a safe, clean, good transaction. What I would submit is that we all need to develop a unique value proposition. You know, the agents that are savvy with this, who care in this evolving marketplace, have one. You know, as the industry moves towards even more transparent and negotiable commission structures, buyer agents who adapt by offering personalized, value-driven services will be able to differentiate themselves and get paid no matter the market. You know, this evolution can lead to a marketplace where experience, expertise, and the quality of service are the true differentiators, rather than the ability to navigate a traditional commission structure and just open doors like they say we do, right? You know, with these lawsuits coming about, it has forced me to develop kind of a unique perspective about it. I can't control what the outcome is. You know, I, for one, feel like if we just educated people enough that they would realize the value that we bring to a transaction, and that, yes, we should get paid, and they need to provide a way for buyer agents to get paid. Obviously, consumers want it. You have 89% of homes last year were bought with a buyer agent's help in the US, 89%. That was up 3% from the year before at 86%. So that right there is telling you that people want help. They want someone to help them navigate the process, right? So, you know, I firmly believe we will all be able to thrive no matter the outcome if we all work towards building a business that is on a solid foundation, no matter the market. If you have your clients and they're hiring for your knowledge and expertise because you've educated them on it, and not just because you can get them in and open a door. Having systems in place that guarantee them an outcome and help them navigate kind of the muddy waters of real estate sometimes is imperative. I get at least 100+ hours a year in extra education just because I want to be on top of things. And you can too, and I know many of you do. Many of you get way more than I do. So just always being open and studying and taking the control of our industry back from everything that everybody is trying to, I feel like, kind of attack it.
And Susan, you bring up so many good points, and I just wanted to let everybody know we're going to continue this conversation 2 weeks from today, and then so on 2 weeks from today to Tuesday, and then the next Tuesday as well. So if you haven't already RSVP'd to that webinar, the next one is going to be more about crafting your unique value proposition, and we'll kind of get more into the nitty-gritties of that. And then the next one is about mastering your unique value proposition. And honestly, this is what our industry needs. We need to start creating, letting people understand our value, because we are essential to the transaction. We are essential to buyers and essential to sellers too. Let's not forget an unrepresented buyer on your listing is going to be a disaster for your seller. And so I'd like to kind of just bring that up to it. Buyer agency is not just for buyers, it is for sellers also. We put the link of where to register for the future webinars. If you're interested, let's keep this conversation going. I think it's essential, and please invite more people, because we want to make sure that our unique value is getting out there and the public knows. And the more people we have talking about it, the more people we have owning that value, then the better it is for our industry as a whole. So please come to the webinars, invite anybody you know. We're happy to have that conversation with them. And I believe we have a quick video here. Bree, I think you have that video.
We were built by top producers for top producers. The problem is a lot of people haven't ever really built a solid foundation.
"2024 is going to be a year of agents who are making it happen. It's not going to fall in our lap, and it's going to be us going out there, making those connections, and doing what we need to do to help people."
We're focusing on our time, and I think that that's one of the most critical things, is that we start really becoming accountable ourselves for our time.
Having these tools in front of me, it makes me more confident to say what I have to offer as a buyer agent. I mean, versus like, work with me, why? I don't know. Having these tools and what I can offer, I even feel more confident to work for myself.
You're going to see what you need to actually bring in to make it worth your while, and the steps to actually bringing it in and having a business that is going to provide you and your family stability and wealth through any market. You can do this. It will change your life if you let it. Be open to it. Do the hard.
Are you ready to unlock your real estate potential? Elevate your success with the Top Producer Real Estate Academy. Apply today to take your real estate career to the next level.
All right, thank you for that, Shauna. Yeah. So I'm really curious with you guys, and that's kind of why I wanted to have this discussion, is how many of you have an actual unique proposition or feel really confident already in navigating buyer agency? Any thoughts or concerns about that?
I have something. I don't know if I'm cutting someone off. Hopefully I'm not. But I have quite a few notes and questions regarding the buyer's agent commissions. Just being a broker here in town, I would say that some agents don't deserve these large set commissions, so to speak. That the listing agent is offering this to bring a buyer. Some buyer's agents aren't adding value, which is a shame, but then some are. And to your point of negotiating that commission, there's going to be some buyer's agents out there that say, okay, I'm going to get you in the house. I'm going to open the door for you. And I'll give you a list of home inspectors, and then call it a day. Pay me X flat fee, whatever they're going to do, because they don't know their value. They don't know how they can essentially help their client. And I feel like there's going to be a certain percentage of agents that kind of just go that route, and maybe even some of these larger companies hiring an agent like that to quote unquote do that bare minimum. But to the point of those agents that do deserve the commissions and dollars that are out there and that are earnable out there. To your point, we do say, I'll take care of everything. I got you. And outlining that unique value proposition, I would say to everyone on this call, everyone here cares, and everyone here is doing above and beyond and doing more than they have to. That's why you're here. That's why you're here learning about this. So I would challenge you to notate some of those. What is everything? What are some of the things that you're taking care of for your client that differentiate you from the competition? Because what you might think is normal every day, this is what should be done. I promise you a lot of agents aren't doing that, and that does set you apart. And the fact that you do care does set you apart. So there's my 2 cents. Feel free to give me change.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shauna. I agree. And that's why we're doing this, is because, I saw, and I've watched a lot, obviously, over the last couple years, kind of what's going to happen. How are these lawsuits all going to come about? How are they be decided? And what I found is they have this list circulating. Like if you look online and it says, what does an agent do? And it's a list of things that like really you could hire anyone to do it, I guess if they had a license, and it's quite easy sometimes to get a license, just depending on what state you're in. And so, I looked at that list. I'm like, that's not what I do. That's what my transaction coordinator does. Those of us that have established an actual business, that's what my, maybe my showing assistant does, and help opening the door and things like that. But what I do is I help negotiate and advocate for my client, looking after their best interest. I create a home buying strategy or home selling strategy with them. I've built an actual business, and I know there are many of us out there who have. And so that's why I was just curious if there's anyone out there that wants to chime in, what your thoughts are on the whole matter. Anyone? Everybody listening, or is it just me and you, Shauna?
No, we're still here.
Yeah.
I think
Hello, everyone.
I had to step away for a minute, so Myth, but what I'm thinking you were talking about was, and forgive me if I'm repeating what you said, but with every buyer, I make it mandatory that they sit down with me for up to 2 hours prior to going out, just to go through everything, every form.
That's what you do for 2 hours?
Absolutely. I call it a buyer orientation meeting, and I just tell them, I don't care if you've experienced, if you haven't bought a house in the last 4 years, I really want you to sit down with me so we can talk about the climate of where it is today and what's going on. I think as a fiduciary, we're seeing now where people are, I just read a lawsuit somewhere this morning where just because you've given something to somebody in writing and they've signed it, doesn't mean that your fiduciary responsibility is over at that point.
No, that's true. And yeah, there's case law out there that, there was a brokerage, about 20, 25 years ago up in Minnesota that got sued by a buyer, and they sued on the behalf of every buyer that had ever been represented by this brokerage. They had to have in writing twice, dual agency or limited agency. But because the buyer said it hadn't been properly explained to them, they didn't understand it fully and how it would impact them. And they sued, and they sued on the behalf of every other buyer too that firm had ever represented as a limited or a dual agent. And they won, and it put that brokerage out of business. Their E&O insurance wouldn't cover it because it's not covered by E&O. And so they're really huge. If you're not doing it and you don't understand it, you probably shouldn't partake in it, I guess is what my thoughts are. Del, you were going to say something a little bit ago.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of add to the conversation. You probably pick up from my accent that I'm Australian. I've been involved in real estate in Queensland in particular, where they only have one agent, which is the listing agent. And once I came here to the States and I got my license here in Nevada, I realized the difference between only having the one agent and then having the two agents to represent both sides. And it really, I really focused on that and saw the differences. In Queensland, what happens is the buyer thinks that the agent is representing them. The public has no idea that that agent is representing the seller, not the buyer. And that really drives it home to me. If we lose this situation where the buyer agent sort of disappears because nobody wants to pay some commission, I think it'll be a detriment to the industry and to the consumer. And I don't think that point is being driven home enough with all these lawsuits and things that are going on. So I'm trying to train myself to introduce the buyer broker agreement, because when I started here back in 2010 as a transaction coordinator for a really great agent, she never uses one because she believes that, you know, if you don't want to work with me, that's fine. I don't have to have an agreement. But so I've come from that mindset, but I'm training myself. No, that's not right. There's only two forms in Nevada that forms agency, and that's the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. All the other forms are just either the purchase contract or disclosures. So they're the only two forms that are important. And unfortunately, the public has this preconceived idea that commission is always split 50-50. It's a standard 6%. I mean, the public has got all this idea. So that's got to come from the agents, I guess. And I keep trying to educate buyers and sellers as best as I can, but I'm just one little tiny Australian. So that's my 2 cents.
No, for sure, for sure. And I think what happened is when we transitioned to buyer agency from sub-agency, not enough education was given to the buyer or to the seller. And that's what some of the lawsuits are about. They never had to disclose so much because everybody represented the seller back in the day, right? So even if you went to one brokerage and that agent helped you buy a listing at another brokerage, it still was all compensated by the listing agent, what they had negotiated, because everybody represented the seller. But when we switched to buyer agency and that sub-agency compensation became buyer agency, we failed to, I won't say all of us, because I know there's a huge faction of us who didn't, but there was quite of the industry overall who have failed to properly educate the public about what they're paying for. And that's where that lawsuit, well, a few of the lawsuits have come about. And unfortunately, we can't go back and turn back time, but I do feel that we need to start educating as much as you can, everything that you can, every consumer on, everything a buyer agent really does. We are consultants. I would never advise someone to go to court with their opponent's attorney. I would never advise someone to go to court without an advocate for themselves, especially if there's an advocate on the other side for the other party. And we have that same fiduciary responsibility. Granted, it's in a narrow scope of just real estate, but that bit can impact someone's life. I mean, it can either set them up or it can create a huge amount of issues for them. So we hold a lot of responsibility for that person or that family or whoever it is. And, it's been treated far too lightly and the public has not been educated, is my take on it, is how I feel. And that's why we've developed, it's just an academy, and it's just basically an academy to help people build their own business, build a solid business with their own unique value proposition, basically giving you a business that will feed you through any market. I've tested it in several markets. Like I said, I came out here in 2019. I didn't know a soul, and I was the top producer in the first year. Just basically because if you know real estate and you know how to represent, you will find the people that want that representation. And if you have any unique value and you have the systems in place, you'll be able to build the business that you want, right? And so, you know, as we built that academy, we just saw a huge amount of people that even just want to talk about it and learn. So we developed this, you know, free webinar series to kind of just start the discussion, I guess, basically. That's what we're trying to do. So anybody else have any input into this? Because I'm just really curious how everybody is responding, even in Nevada, Utah, everything that's going on. Before it was largely on the East Coast and the Midwest, so we got kind of, and you know, it's come to us. So what are we doing?
Susan, how long have you been in Utah?
Since 2019,
Those are some pretty impressive numbers.
right? Yeah. I came to Utah. I opened a brokerage when I first got here. It was kind of my own boutique brokerage. I've ever since I got into real estate after my first year of wandering around, not knowing what value I added. Once I developed a system, I've always closed, you know, somewhere between 40 to 60 every year, sometimes 62, 63, something like that. But in the meanwhile, I also enjoy educating others how to do it. That's kind of my passion. So,
Well, I think from being in the business for 40 years, that's what we were taught way back then, was cooperate with other agents, teach them, help them, have them teach you. And that's what's been lost.
mhm.
And it was lost a long time ago. So it's nice to have someone trying to find our way back, because that's what's needed. We need to cooperate,
Right.
you know. The consumer gets a better shake at the end of the day when everybody's cooperating. I've had a thought recently in a discussion I was in the other day with some guys. If commissions, not if, but commissions are negotiable, but if it comes to the point to where buyer's agents are negotiating with sellers for their commission on behalf of their buyers, what's going to happen to the sellers that have a days on market of 135 days in a market where it should have been sold in hours? Then potentially agents could start negotiating a 6 or a 10% commission back that seller. And I mean, potentially.
Yeah. So we can't talk about, you know, amounts of commissions or anything of that. It's, but yeah, I know people that
it's
negotiate
just a
all kinds of
danger.
numbers right now. Even now, they negotiate anything they want. And, you know, that's where I'm kind of confused, because I'm like, they don't realize people negotiate what they want already anyway if they're running a business. So I don't think decoupling commissions is really going to have a huge impact like they think it will. The only thing that they really need to put in place is, I mean, commercial real estate does it all day long as well already. But the only thing that they need to put in place is they need to put in place for the average home buyer, especially first-time home buyers, to be able to, if the seller won't cover it, to be able to finance it in with the purchase of their home somehow. Because those people will be left out in the cold if they can't afford an agent.
Yeah.
I mean, what do we do? Public agents, like they have public defenders. Like, I don't know how you would, doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? And then they're still left with, I couldn't afford a good agent, so I got a raw deal. And
Right. And awesome. Well, thank you for everything, Susan. I'm so excited to join you in the next 2 weeks here. And anyone who wants to share this, please just let us know. Oh, Bree's got it in that's where you can find the Top Producer Academy and future webinars. So we hope to see you there. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody, for joining.
Take care. Thank you. Have a good day.